That's something I remember C.S. Lewis talking about, and he's saying the idea is like in so many religions, the idea is that the more you get into it, the more of yourself you leave behind, and you just become less and less of an individual. But in Christianity, the closer you get to Christ, the more you as a unique person is meant to grow and prosper. And so you are more you.
Yeah.
When you get deeper into the light of Christ than you would be outside of him.
There's Soli Deo Gloria and Laus Deo Semper, which is like praise God always, or to God be glory alone. And you'll see those signatures on Well-Tempered Clavier, which was not a church music piece. So that's a rabbit hole. But like there's this weird blur that I think we're trying to test. You and I, Dave, are trying to test these ideas, essentially. Like that's another purpose of this podcast, is to just simply test ideas of what is worship music, what is not worship music,
and art in general.
And in art in general.
What does it look like to be artistic as a Christian and have it not be bad evangelistic stuff? Like, all right, we are live from high atop Spurgeon Audio Tower, ensconced in downtown Denton, Texas. None of those things are true.
I'm not live.
No, we're not live. We're on the ground, and actually probably on the north side of town, I guess.
Yeah.
You know.
In a garage.
Yes. I'm Dave.
I'm Jake.
And this is Coronation Radio. Welcome to our very first episode. I had a podcast before that was called Spurgeonaudio, and then it became Kingsway Talk because it kind of expanded beyond just doing Charles Spurgeon sermons. And then I had a little boy, and well, me and my wife did, not just me. And so they kind of got set aside, and eventually I just decided, that's going to be on the back burner for a while. And then you encouraged me to get back into this year, so here we are. And we are two people that have absolutely nothing in common.
That's far from the truth.
That's also untrue.
Yes.
What are some of the things that we have in common, Jake?
Well,
who are you? Tell us about yourself here.
Well, I where do I begin? I guess
born in a crossfire hurricane.
Most people know me as a musician, and found myself at UNT doing my doctorate in composition. And
what's UNT?
University of North Texas.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And
I forgot about that place.
Yeah, a lot of avant-garde, good stuff going on there. Graduated during pandemic, worked at Amazon for a year, and now I find myself in finance as a phone consultant. Helping anyone that comes through the door. Talking to them about their accounts and tools at their disposal, giving them options and such. And so we met at Christ Community Church, where you've been a long-time member, 12 years.
Yeah,
so
something like that. It's been a long time.
And so I was at Village Denton beforehand, and then brief stint at Denton Bible Church. And me and my wife recently joined C3 in Denton, and it's been incredible just how, hospitable and with open arms and ready to jump in and any assistance or help. And Ari and I, my wife, we were getting kind of, I was especially, but she was kind of feeling it too, that getting sick of mega churches. And that's probably this, people have their definitions, but basically churches with more than 1,000 people, and to reduce that by a magnitude of 10 and come to a 100-member church has been really refreshing. Especially, I think we've been so well equipped to, we've been so well discipled that we're ready to kind of pour back into in whatever small or big ways. And then we got to talking, me and Dave, about everything from Blue Stars to drum corps and music and podcasting and everything. And
yeah, it just so happens that we both so the name of this podcast is Coronation Radio, and that is based on one of the biggest things I think we probably have in common, other than Jesus, which is we both have marched for the Blue Stars Drum and Bugle Corps. And when I marched back in the olden days of, we were lucky to break 20-member horn lines, and we were marching G bugles still. What I can't remember. What is it that you played again? When
euphonium.
That's right. I thought it was something.
Even though I was a saxophone major, it was like a whim where I was. It was my junior year, and I turned 21, and it was my rage out year. I never marched before, and I was saxophone, and I was like, if I'm going to do any sort of drum corps, even if it's, D2 or whatever, like I need to do it now. And so I picked up a baritone and euphonium, and I fell on my face. I auditioned for Phantom Regiment first with some friends, but it got my, experience and, being part of that camp, which is a unique experience in of itself for 3 days being, hunkered down. And then I went over to Blue Stars audition camp in Indianapolis. All this is in 2013. And I got a spot as an alternate, actually. So I was never part of the original, starting lineup.
You just wait for somebody to break their ankle or something like that.
Well, but the thing is, there was one kid who had a spot, but he was a high schooler, and he didn't get out until June. So from spring training to June, I marched his spot, and then the caption head, when he finally came, he's like, Jake knows your drill. Jake knows your music. You're the alternate now. You came so late, and so I was just really kind of astounded, especially as a saxophone player. I've only been playing baritone for 6 months, but I think he knew that I was a music major, that I was going to work hard at it, and my tone did come eventually. So,
and almost all the sax players that I knew that played a horn and drum corps usually switched to baritone. Something about the embouchure being really similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so that's a really interesting experience. Just because drum corps is such a tight knit fraternity of people, it's. I've heard it described a lot of different ways, like marching band on steroids or
professional marching band.
Yeah, my buddy Leland Jordan, who marched for the Marine D&B, he called it the thrash punk version of marching band. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty fair. That's a fair way to describe it, at least up to a certain point. I don't know. I try to reserve my judgment about where it is now. I don't want to be one of those guys who can only just poo-poo everything that's come after the years that I marched. But everything, it's definitely had its changes since I started. Yeah. But now we're talking about something that almost maybe 2 or 3% of the people that will ever listen to this will be like, what in the world are you guys on about?
Right.
Just go look it up. Google it. Videos everywhere. It's
DCI.
The beauty of the internet. Yeah, DCI.
Yeah. Drum Corps International.
God rest DCA's soul.
Well, that on top of that, I would probably encourage that whoever's listening, go to a live show. Yeah. There's nothing like a live performance. You can get a little bit out of YouTube, but just the wall of sound and the power and how loud it is. But it's a good kind of loud. It's not like, oh my gosh, my ear plugs. But it's like,
this isn't rock concert in front of the amp loud.
Right. I'd say it's a glory. It's a sort of look
up Madison Scouts 1995. Just watch that video. You'll understand. That's the video I always point people to if they want to understand what drum corps is all about. Yeah. Granted, that's definitely a slightly older way of doing drum corps, but it's still, in terms of the raw energy of it, that's just the best. But yeah, so the tie between that and the name of this podcast, of course, the saying, the motto, I was going to say slogan, that's not the right word. The motto of Blue Stars is Finis Coronat Opus, which I'm sure is not how you say that. I'm sure we need to have a Latin
American
scholar
Latin,
on one of these.
Well, I
days.
will say my experience at UNT, one of my professors who was an old music expert, he was like, there's two kinds of Latin. one is you hear in American Latin Mass, the Americanized version, Finis coronat opus, and then there's the true Latin, which is like Fini corono, opus, whatever, and but you're probably saying it right,
It's as good. I mean, it's a dead language at this point. Who's going to correct me?
But it means the end crowns the work.
That's right, and it's true certainly in an activity like drum corps where you work the entire year towards a goal of creating a show that involves music and visual elements and perfecting it and building it towards the conclusion at the end of the season. And it really applies honestly to life and to the idea that Jesus talked about, that he who perseveres to the end will be saved. And you see what that looks like, and all of the saints gathered around the throne in Revelation and that kind of thing. But that's very much something that I know I've thought about, and I'm sure you've thought about on our own. And now we just brought it together in a little podcast that we're going to talk about all kinds of things on.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about some current events. We're going to talk about art and music and anything really that catches our fancy. We're going to talk about biblical things that we encounter that impact us greatly, what we're doing creatively, because both of us have different creative things we like to try our hands at. And it's nice to have something like this to do again. I mean, I've been so busy with taking care of our little almost 3-year-old, and after a while, I just was kind of like burning myself out, and my wife just encouraged me, you should have something to do again. And I've been playing with a band, playing New Orleans brass band, and now I'm doing this too. And it's just like, this feels right. This feels like a good thing.
Well, we met at the smoke shop, and I think we were both at our, burned out both ends. I got twins that are a year and a half old.
Yeah, that'll burn you out.
Yeah, and so we're just both new dads, and so that could be another thing that we bring up and talk about, is just our experience being new dads. So, and I think we kind of came with a posture of just like, we need to make things again and create things and sort of have like a trajectory for hope, if that makes sense. That like, like cliche or not cliche, but like Christ is our hope and our anchor, but putting in, because he's our anchor, we need to have these kind of finite, like, boots on the ground methods of doing things and looking forward to something, not letting it become work, just letting it be fun. So I think we're not like gonna make a fixed schedule of this, but we would like to be consistent about it and have fun with this.
Well, I mean, I don't think we're fooling ourselves. I mean, the podcast world, if you look at all the articles, is kind of in the declining era of its influence. But so, we're not sitting here going, we're going to build a gigantic audience and we're going to have,
brand.
Lamborghinis and
network.
Yes, I know, man.
5 different podcasts going on.
No, I have a job, and if people like this and want to listen to it, that's good. But at this point, we're just doing it because we like the idea of creating something and being able to talk about stuff and having some fun with it. And it's a way that we'll be able to share some of the things we're working on. Like, we're both doing some writing things, and you're doing a lot of music creation.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll be able to share a little bit of the stuff that the band that I'm playing with, the Big Easy Brass Band, which is based out of Dallas, stuff that we play. Just all kinds of things. There's a lot of different things that we do, and I think we can have a lot of fun, with this. And I'm going to be going up to La Crosse, Wisconsin in the summer for the alumni corps thing that they're doing. Me and my brother, who marched with me my last couple of years, we're going to go up there and do that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to doing that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't really going to do it. I was feeling kind of like, I don't know if I'm going to go. It's just a lot of effort. My brother was like, come with me. I'm like, okay.
It's going to be great.
Fine.
It's going to be
That
a
sounds
riot.
good. Yeah.
I can't wait to see the pictures and
I just suddenly felt like a lot different about it. I was like, okay, good. Let's do it. And I haven't seen a lot of those guys. Oh, gosh.
So how many years did you march total?
Well, I marched 2000 to 2003.
Okay.
So I marched 4 years. I taught 2004
Yeah.
at Blue Stars. And that was an interesting experience. And then I went to another corps and taught there in 2005. I also started working with a senior corps down here that year, and I was with them for a couple of years. And then I just couldn't afford to keep doing drum corps anymore. I had to work, I had to deal with that.
Yeah.
And so, like, even the senior corps was just too much time for how much work I really needed to do and the investment of money and time that it would have required. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to doing it. It would be. I wish they would start a senior corps down here again. I guess that's not even a proper term anymore. Like, is there even such a thing as a senior corps? I know that DCA's gone. They have this new like DCI all age thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it would be nice to have something like that to do again. But I still got to prioritize things, and the brass band is a lot of fun, and it pays me.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Getting paid to play gigs is it's a nice thing, and it's a lot of fun to play that kind of music. But
I remember talking about we had an equipped group, basically Sunday school, and we were talking about maybe that's something that we'll address too, is just talking about as we're getting older, more. You have less and less time, and then it's just a natural part of having kids. But just like, how do you prioritize those things? So.
Yeah, how is I think that's important, and I think that's one of the reasons that we're doing this here.
Yeah.
Well, I think that brings us. So both of us have backgrounds in music, because I have a degree in music as well. I'm a tuba player. That's my field. My bachelor's is in performance. I was working on a master's, but it didn't really work out for me to finish it. And honestly, I don't really think I need it. I have no interest in teaching or anything like that. So I'm just I'm pretty happy with the level of education that I have for that. If I was going to go back to school, I might want to do something else, like try to do maybe seminary or something like that. But even then, I just don't have the time for that. And
at the end of the day, getting a seminary degree, you probably know all you already could ace out of that, and you would just be going there for the piece of paper at that point.
I mean, there's a lot of things I don't like. The language stuff would be a big thing to do it, because it is tough to learn like Greek or Hebrew in a informal way. You really I actually know a dude who he gives lessons to people who want to learn Greek. He's like, so that you kind of gives you that formal structure. And I'm like, that's really good that you can help people do that. My youngest sister, went to a school, and she took those classes, and she gave me her books. I've looked through them, and I know just enough to be dangerous, but yeah. So in terms of this, as I've grown and I've matured, I would say probably at this point, I think that I've begun to focus more on the pastoral side of things. Like when I was younger, if you were to, I think the old episodes are floating around out there on the internet somewhere. I don't know where, of like spurgeonaudio or Kingsway Talk. Definitely, like when I started, I had more of a focus on things like apologetics and debating with people and engaging. And as I've kind of matured, I've kind of grown, not to be against that, but to put it more into a context of, let's look through this from the perspective of where is your heart, and let's talk about that. Because I mean, I know for me, that's been huge too. Let's actually work with people to talk about things. Like, we were talking about this the other day. We were talking about an article. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember the circumstances of it anymore, but the subject of all of the controversies in our current culture surrounding sexuality and all this kind of stuff. And without rehashing too much, obviously we'll probably talk about this more when new news comes out regarding that. But it's so often people want to focus on it as a political punching bag to deal with, and rather than thinking about, these are people,
right?
And these are people who have their own lives and their own struggles and their own hearts that need to be ministered to, and there's a lot of fear that goes into that debate. And like, what are we afraid of? Jesus is on the throne. Why are you running away from engaging people in love and patience? And so that kind of thing, like that's one of the things that's driven me, is wanting to think about very patiently and prayerfully preparing to have those kind of conversations. Again, not to beat people, not to win, but to love people well in a Christ-like way where they are, and be able to minister the gospel in that context. And that's just one example, but that's something that's had very much on my mind over the course of the last few years.
That's good. I was listening. We're gonna talk more on, but like Carl Trueman's Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, and he talks about how in the preface, like what this book is and what this book is not. And in the what this book is not section, he really highlights a lot of the, he's very well aware of like what Christians are doing on Twitter, on Facebook, on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, he has his own podcast that's Mortification of Spin. He talks about this kind of stuff all the time.
Yes, yeah, and so he's an expert on it, and I trust him. But I think he really so beautifully said that it's an attempt to not dunk on those or be right or wrong about it, but to engage with people and engage with, especially those that are in part of the different communities that he's not a part of, and so I really admired that. And I think that's part of, the call to be pastoral instead of apologetic or, a youth pastor. I feel like when you're young, there's not a lot of spots you can, you don't have the wisdom of a lead pastor. You don't have the knowledge because you've probably not gone to seminary yet of like someone who's just graduated. So where does that lay you? Apologetics and being a youth pastor, which is unfortunate, that we kind of relegate those roles to, younger men who are called to ministry, and that we can't be more creative in where to put them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the reasons too, or one of the things too that immediately jumps to mind is in a lot of churches, we struggle to disciple people. We struggle to have a good engagement from older to younger generations, because so often the older generation just immediately regards the younger one as being not very wise. Of course, they're not very wise because they're young. We don't, the younger generation struggles because they haven't learned everything yet. Yeah. They're still experiencing things, but there's a lot of, it seems like it's natural for there to be kind of animosity there. And it goes both ways, because you see the younger generation just regard the older one with a lot of eye rolling, and you're just some old people, and so and churches will kind of balkanize themselves sometimes. Like they'll have a service that's more geared towards the older people with like more hymns, and they'll have a service that's geared towards younger people with more contemporary music. And of course another subject that we'll touch on here is music and
liturgy and
exactly. Although it's funny, now you're starting to see a lot of young people go towards very liturgical churches, like Orthodox Church or the Catholic Church. You're seeing a lot of people start to leave evangelical churches as part of the ongoing, what they're calling the big sort, because they're looking for something that's more plainly religious on its face. Maybe that's not the best way of putting it, but
no, that's good, because I mean Truman also in that preface talks about he cites another author's work of just the different categories of man and self, and we had the agronomy and agricultural self, where up until the Industrial Revolution, a lot of your life was built around, will I be able to eat because of the environment? Will I be able to eat because there was a good harvest, or was there a flood or a drought? And then he also talks about the economical self, and that was upended with, Karl Marx, and kind of having that awareness and that his third eye moment of like, well, there's only so much that I can go to. There's the religious self, that Canterbury Tales in the medieval ages, like all of those people were united by religion, you know, and so even though they were different, different uniquely suited people,
Yeah.
and so I think there's this kind of yearning that we don't want to be the sexual self, we don't want to be the economical self, or we want to be the religious self again, if that makes sense. We want to have that tie and commonality with each other.
Well, and especially because we still have this idea in our culture that everything ultimately has to be about your own personal fulfillment and you feeling like you've achieved what you're intended to do with your life. And so often, when you read through the book, he does talk about, these different eras of the Enlightenment period, which is, where this all really began, is it come out of the medieval era into the Enlightenment, post-Reformation. And you have all of those ideas that are competing with each other because of, the influences you're seeing from political figures and academia and art and culture. And he spends a whole chapter talking about poets and the way that these poets had, begun expressing, emotional ideas in this very passionate, forthright way, a way that probably in past generations would have been regarded as almost dishonorable, but it's one of those things that as you look through where we've gone culturally in the West, because it's really, the focus is on Western civilization. You can't necessarily point this at, say, China or, maybe Middle Eastern culture or something like that. Like there's all kinds of different places in the world that don't necessarily have the same trajectory. But so much of Western culture from Europe and the United States and in North America in general, stuff like that, you have a lot of influences that have culminated in our modern society of what am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
It culminates on yourself. And it's like, is this really healthy? Is this really how we're supposed to be? And I think that's one reason, that, like you said, that people have begun gravitating towards very liturgical services or very liturgical churches that offer sort of a stability.
Yeah.
That's not to say that they have, no agreement with what's actually being taught there. I can't, that's another issue. And again, that's an issue that we would get into in terms of the conversations we would have with people who are going to be a part of that church. But it's something where I can definitely sympathize with a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, music is a big part of that. That kind of takes us into the other topic we wanted to talk about in terms of worship music, music that's used in church services, what's appropriate. That's a huge, huge topic. I made an appearance on the worship review right around the time I was getting ready to wrap up Kingsway Talk. And at the time, I hadn't quite decided that I was going to do that. So I'm starting to pop into other podcasts, and then I decided to cancel my own. And it's like, well, this was pointless. But no, it was a good conversation with those guys. And I think that's a huge subject with a lot we can go over. But man, I struggle sometimes with a lot of the stuff that's contemporary. I was going to say current, but that's not really a good word. But the stuff that's really contemporary, that's really popular, and sometimes it's like, where's the line between something that a person individually feels worshipful in,
right,
and what's appropriate in church?
I was listening to Gavin Ortland's Truth Unites, and great show. And he talked. He's going through it with veneration of icons. And I it's like a very similar. He calls it an accretion in the sense that on its face level and purpose, I think the common defense of those that support art as liturgical and part of worship, they say, well, it's to get us and motivate us to pray to the Lord. But it accretes, it increases that well, it creeps on us that we start to worship the icon itself, and it becomes idolatry. And I think in a similar fashion that with contemporary worship music, it's like, it's not exactly, but you can see some similarities to iconography in that way that, you know, it's meant to point us to worship the Lord and worship God, not ourselves, not get something out of it, but to give a sacrifice and offer up to something to the Lord. But what it turns into is this sort of idolatry and this iconography that we begin to worship the music itself, you know, instead of the Lord. It's like, thank you music for making me feel good, you know, thank you music for helping me think this way, you know. And it's like,
well, especially in this post romantic era period that we live in, where, you know, we still revere a lot of music from that era, which is very dynamic and emotional and expressive, and so we look for that still in our modern music.
Absolutely.
And it's not to say that there's no emotion in older church music. I mean, I certainly think there is. I mean, listen to, like probably the most well-known older, like pre-romantic era church music, like in terms of like music written to be worship music, would probably be something like Handel's Messiah or something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
Certainly something that immediately
I've had conversations with one of my good buddies who's like very much into the regulative principle of worship. And he's like, well, I would never condone Handel's Messiah in a worship service, like as in liturgy.
Even though much of it's literally scripture.
A lot of it's scriptural. But and the same thing with I've been studying Bach a lot lately because I've been burnt out on music and contemporary music. So I'm like, well, let's listen to some old music and see if this will, you know, spur my heart on. And it has, because I think when you listen to a lot of Bach's career, you can hear the purpose of it was liturgical. But then later on, you know, his first employments, you know, the first parts of his life through his younger years, being a teenager through the 30s, you know, he was a church musician.
Yep.
He played for, I think it was St. Thomas's School in Germany, and so. But he then was, after
prolific, I would think is a good word. And
if you, side note on that is like, it's incredible that it was for like, I think it was like some sort of church/music conservatory, but it's incredible that they probably had like 50 people on staff, you know, that like it was a whole economical center that they could support. They could not only support church musicians, but they could support. Bach had not only services that he played for and composed for, but he had students regularly teaching them how to do worship music, and not only music, but just church music too. And then he went on and he became a employment of the court, which is where he met his second wife after his first wife died tragically. And he was no longer tied and tethered to the court. And that's where you get these pieces like Well-Tempered Clavier. Like, that's not like an oratorio. That's not a mass or anything like that. You know, well, I guess he did write passions. He wrote he wrote passions. He didn't write masses, but because he was Lutheran. But he started writing things like Well-Tempered Clavier, and like these very artistic, you know, non-religious artistic, if that makes sense. And that's something that I'm really curious to, is like, I think there's some historians that can point to how he viewed that worship was in all of his music, even in that post church musician era. He was writing for the court, but that still was worship music to him. Yeah. And you would probably still find the signature of saying Laus Deo Gloria, or Semper Deo Gloria, or Laus Deo Semper, or something like praise be to God, or Soli Deo Gloria. That's what it is. Yeah. Like, there's Soli Deo Gloria and Laus Deo Semper, which is like praise God always, or to God be glory alone. And you'll see those signatures on Well-Tempered Clavier, which was not a church music piece. So that's a rabbit hole. But like, there's this weird blur that I think we're trying to test, you and I, Dave, are trying to test these ideas, essentially. Like, that's another purpose of this podcast, is to just simply test ideas of what is worship music, what is not worship music.
And art in general.
And in art in general.
What does it look like to be artistic as a Christian and have it not be like bad evangelistic stuff? Like,
yeah,
this is the God's Not Dead Part 72. Like, oh,
well, I mean,
come
it's
on, man.
It's this like attempt to be commercial.
Yeah.
It's attempt to be successfully, successful in terms of drawing in funds, eyes,
because even modern music, like for churches, is an industry.
Yeah.
And you have to please the industry leaders. You have to be able to sell it. It has to be able to get on the radio. It has to be able to be chosen out of your, because you make your money by people having their licenses, and then they play your music, and then you get paid. And so much music is written in a very surface level. That's not even. That doesn't sound quite right. It's written in a way that churches with all kinds of different backgrounds and beliefs can pick them out. Now, that's not necessarily new, because there's been, like hymns have been written by all kinds of people. Like the guy who translated "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God" into English was a Unitarian. And I mean, that's of course, you can kind of tell he was struggling with that as he brought one of the most powerful hymns of the Lutheran Church into English, with that as his, personal.
I mean, that's
beliefs.
Martin Luther wrote the lyrics and the music. Did he not? That's one of probably the Lutheran chorale. You know, yeah,
that's their theme song.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where, if we're going to look at where art is in this day, and because you mentioned, he's still, like Bach, when he was writing Well Tempered Clavier and things like that, he's still looking at what he's doing as this is to the glory of God. And so what does it mean to write a story to the glory of God that is not an overt attempt at evangelism that ends with, here's how to become a Christian, or something like that? I mean, to me, as a giant nerd, the first thing that comes to mind for that kind of thing would be something like Lord of the Rings,
right? Which
is not overtly Christian, but it certainly has a lot of things that point to that. It isn't like you don't have an Aslan figure, you don't have a Jesus figure, but you have types and shadows of Jesus and different characters and things they do, and you have people who, you have also types and shadows of this falling of humanity repeated in different ways, lusting after worldly power and finding only in that destruction as God's sovereignty is ultimately victorious in everything. But again, that's a whole other episode probably.
Well, yeah, I mean, to rabbit hole that, like, do you think that's a great analog? And do you think, I almost think that the reason why it's incomparable to now, like things like Chronicles of Narnia and Lord of the Rings, is like, I think it's all the publisher's fault. I think, it's like you look at those novels, you look at those series, and then you just look at like Bach, like, they didn't have a Penguin Random House or, a, XYZ to market it, and it's really, the flaw is just marketing. And you think of like Christian writers that are trying to make something comparable, they're kind of at the whim of their publisher, and it's unfortunate. And given that Tolkien and Lewis had their university behind them, it's probably another big thing for another episode.
Although, when they were going to publish popular works, they definitely had to get, publishers lined up. But it helps that what they were writing was highly agreeable to people that they wanted to read it. And, Tolkien was basically inventing a whole new genre. I mean, there had been, medieval works, and there'd been,
like fantasy,
like people, knights and going forth, but that was more historical. It was like Arthurian legends and things like that. But of course, even that, Arthur, of course, that's all still fantasy. But it wasn't until they really established what he was doing that, like, basically the whole modern era of fantasy writing comes out of Tolkien. So but I think that's one of those things too, where our drive as humans to create, that's rooted in our being made in the image of God, and very much grows out of that kind of thing that we're made to make. And I think that's a normal and good thing.
Well, here's another idea is for you is, I'm curious what you think about this. Donald Miller is a writer who wrote Blue Like Jazz. That's probably his creme de la creme. But like now, I've kept up with him like over these past 20 years since he's written that book, and he's now a business guru. Like that's his thing. Like that's his brand now. And but like for a stint before he got into this business guru, he wrote about the story brand of business, that every business has a story, and you need to tap, if you can be successful if you tap into story, and he got really and it wasn't so much about being successful, but he got really obsessed with story, of story arcs and such. And I think that like being a Christian artist is like really embracing that, like, because I feel like one of the pitfalls and points of resistance being an artist as a Christian is being how do I say this, is feeling trapped by the idea that if you're making something new, you're probably doing something wrong. And I've heard that in like, theology courses and all that stuff, and it's like when you try to test ideas out as a Christian artist, you get a lot of resistance, whether it's internal or external. And so I think with that said, we need to adhere to the tried and true story arc. Like that's not going to change. Like, and I think Jordan Peterson, he had like a lecture where he talked about, or maybe it's in 12 Rules, one of his books, that like how he's amazed. And I think this is before I don't know, who knows if he's a Christian, but he's amazed by the Christ story, the Passion story, because it is the perfect story arc of, setting up the character, rising tension, climax, and then resolution, and like death, burial, and life, ministry, death, burial, and resurrection, and ascension is like the perfect story arc if you look at it, So working within, as a Christian artist, working within the story arc, embracing that, like it's a tried and true model, it's never going to change, and you got to use it, but then creating new things around that, if that makes it, like you got to let that be the trust of your vineyard. You can do whatever you want in that trust, but you got to do the trust. You can't make a new trust,
Right. Well, that's the thing is, I mean, when I was going to college, you had, I was, like in the Wind Symphony at my undergrad school, and they would want us to play some kind of avant-garde, like just like Schoenberg or one of these other guys that was like ultra modern, postmodern, and you're just playing it, and it's like, what's the difference between this piece of music and if I let my 2-year-old loose on a piano while your twins knock over a bunch of lamps? That's the thing, is when you try to break away from something that makes sense to people's ears and minds, and then you find yourself just making something that's just unlistenable, or it's like, or when you boil it down and you look at it, you realize it's really not any different. It's just not very fun to listen to, but its skeleton is still the same. And we talked about that the other day too. You got a lot of people who just basically went the other way. Guys like Aaron Copland, who said, "I'm just going to take all these folk songs and I'm going to turn them into really deeply orchestrated works of art." And of course, like people have done that with all kinds of different folk songs. Like, who's the guy, Bartok? He did a lot of that with
Hungarian.
A lot of Hungarian folk songs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like that that's real popular. And so I think that there's something to be said for looking back and seeing where you've been.
Right.
Because you aren't going to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
But you can take it and turn it in a new direction.
Absolutely.
And see, here's a way you can take that and develop it in a new way. And I think I think people are always they want to be the one who comes up with a new way to regard it. But we also have in this culture where everybody is super hyper God, I'm saying the same words over and over. I'm way into nostalgia. I'm into wanting to see the same thing over and over again. I mean, that's what we've seen for like the last 10 to 20 years. The internet is this place where people can develop whatever they want, and whether they end up doing, they watch TV shows they watched 40 years ago.
Right.
And
they
they watch movies they watched 40 years ago, and they don't want to think about that, which isn't, again, that's not new either, because I mean, remember the old joke about like oldie stations was the intention of that was to make sure that your parents didn't have to listen to any music that wasn't popular when they were kids or something like that.
Right. There was sort of a challenge. Like I had a colleague at UNT who, the reason why you like what you like is because of nostalgia. Like basically what you listen to between the ages of 13 and 18 will forever define your taste and forever affect how you listen to music, because that will be kind of your foundation for nostalgia. And
that's why I have such weird tastes, because I was playing a lot of stuff and listening to like everything from Sousa marches to to jazz records to James Brown to swing music.
I think he was trying to challenge it, challenge people. And it's like, no, like get outside your, like if you ever find yourself listening to something because of nostalgia, because you have like a deep visceral emotional response to it, like stop. You're doing something wrong. Like, really push yourself and get yourself outside of that. But that's another topic for another day.
I think another subject we'll end up covering is just the concept of pop music. And what is so hot about some of these people that are on there, like how so much of it is studio generated and based upon image more so than anything else. I mean, image has always been a big part of pop music, but a guy like Prince, that's one example that comes to mind as being someone who's successful in pop, but he was the one who was, nobody wrote his tunes. He didn't have, he had a lot of albums, he was recording multiple instrument tracks, that's just the way that he was. And so he just, he had his own weird, peculiar image that he liked to have. But anyway, that's another thing we can get into in the future. Like, we're just kind of, I guess we're kind of just brainstorming things we're going to be talking about.
Ideas.
We're just throwing it out there. But that's okay. That's what this is about.
I have another idea about that, of just how with image and pop music in general, that there's this myth of the tragic artist. All
the movies they make about famous musicians now, they all have that same trajectory. They have the moment how they got into music, the moment that they were discovered, their arc to success, but it's also joined with their arc to addiction, usually is a part of it. And then their moment of hitting rock bottom.
Or some sort of cultural taboo, that like they weren't accepted in a certain way. And I mean, that's certainly true, but I feel like it's ultimately just a myth, because there's a way to be productive and extremely creative without having some sort of, and I think that's another point of being a believer is not, being a Christian is not very sexy. So I think that's probably the biggest point of, that's the biggest reason why any Christian making any
this strong taboo in our modern culture about being Christian, and not just being a Christian, because I mean there's a lot of people who consider themselves Christians, but like being a faithful, believing Christian who says, yeah, I believe that Jesus was who he said he was,
Yeah.
and I believe that if you don't follow him, you are only going to find death.
So then there's like another point too. I got it. That's a good point, because like part of our faith is conforming to the image of Christ. That like we are less of me, more of him, you know. And that's something I really wrestled with during my doctorate, was whether what I was doing was holy work or not, because I have this call in my life as a believer that like, well, it's not about Jake. It's not supposed to be Jake Thede, you know, like his name and image. Like I'm supposed to be doing things for him. And so like you lose this sense of any identity. And I think being creative and an artist is sort of about identity, if that makes sense. And you have this like paradox. And how do you make sense of that? You know, that paradox of, well, if I'm just a mouthpiece for Christ, and like, I know I'm kind of being frank and curt, but like, that's like in a nutshell, in 3 words, a mouthpiece for Christ. Where is me in this, you know? So.
Well, and so it's funny you should put it that way in the context of what we were just talking about a few minutes ago. That's something I remember C.S. Lewis talking about, and he's saying the idea is like in so many religions, the idea is that the more you get into it, the more of yourself you leave behind, and you just become less and less of an individual. But in Christianity, the closer you get to Christ, the more you as a unique person is meant to grow and prosper. And so you are more you.
Yeah.
When you get deeper into the light of Christ than you would be outside of him. And so I think that's one of those things too that is important for us to remember as artists is, you know, there's particular things that I like and I think about and I write and come into my mind. And so when I think about those things, even if they're not like, again, overtly evangelistic things like,
or gospel centered,
right? Which is, of course, the big hot phrase from a decade or so ago. Everything was a gospel centered this and a gospel centered that. When the reality is, you know, we're made to be able to make all kinds of things. You know, if I'm a painter and I just paint a landscape, I'm not just painting a landscape. I am painting a picture of a beauty, my view, the way I see something beautiful that God has made, and it's a tribute to his beauty. Or if I'm a person who is writing a comic book, like a superhero comic book, there are a lot of things I can do that, again, can have those same sort of types and shadows. Again, it doesn't have to be the superhero is really, geez, like, no, that's not, you know, again, that kind of thing can get very boring and preachy quickly. But there's ways you can demonstrate the bigger picture and the greater truth of Christ through something like that. And I mean, that's the kind of thing I think we'll probably get into as we do creative things. Not I'm going to write a comic book, but, you know, we'll maybe write some stories and talk about them, and we'll kind of do our Inklings, imitation of the Inklings here a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, one like final thought is, because it's fresh on my mind, like listen to that Gavin Ortlund veneration of the icons, and how what separates Christianity from cults or pagans or any other religion is that like our God is invisible. And that in the early church fathers and leaders, that, you know, there would be critique from outside leaders of just saying, well, you know, there's no altar, there's no you know thing that I can point to in worship. There was frustration around that, you know, because the Godhead 3 in 1 is invisible, you know, and I think there's something really beautiful, and I think Christianity really marries things like Plato's and those Greeks of concrete versus abstract, and that when these stories are made, like shadows and archetypes of
there's true
of Christ,
ideas in what they're talking about.
There's we're able to abstract it because our God is invisible. I'll say that's the most I'll say. But like,
I think that's good.
Yeah,
and I think that's a really good place to maybe wrap up this first episode. There, there's kind of a general, very broad introduction to the sort of ideas that we want to talk about and dig into. Because like I said, we're going to be talking about all kinds of things. We're going to be pulling up, news stories of things that happened that really strike us as worth discussing. We're going to be talking about stuff we've been reading. We're going to talk about music we've been listening to or playing, art that speaks to us a lot. And this is not going to be a drama podcast. So many people, podcast just becomes right. Here's the latest controversy on the internet over somebody. It's not to say we won't talk about those kind of things, but the goal isn't to, gin up views by getting on a side and flogging the other side. It's going to be, let's be thoughtful about it and
engage.
Yeah, exactly. And like, where can we learn from either position? Honestly, it's something I think about a lot. So, yeah. So I think it's been fun to get this started here. So if you like this, the website is coronationradio.net. I made a Facebook page. I don't really know how deep into all the social media stuff we're going to get because I hate Twitter. It's just not a pleasant place to hang out, or whatever it's called now.
A cesspool, for lack of a better word.
You'll never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. No, that's not fair either. But yeah, no. I mean, I've been on Twitter. I don't really want to go back to Twitter. Instagram, I don't know. So I don't really know. We're still kind of getting our feet wet in terms of what we're gonna do. But that's the website. I hope you will consider. If you like it, feel free to share it. Send us an email. I'm still using the old spurgeonaudio@gmail.com email address because why do I need another email address? It still works. If you got stuff you'd like to hear us talk about, if you want to give us feedback, drop us a note. If you want us to pray for you about something, drop us a note. We're willing to do that. We'd love to. If you're in the Denton area and there's stuff that you feel like you'd like to contribute, we're definitely willing to have conversations with folks. Again, we're going to Christ Community Church. We meet over on Maple Street between Elm and Locust. Come on and check it out. I don't really have a cutesy little closing tagline yet. We're going to have to work on that. As I used to say when I was doing spurgeonaudio, I'd always close it out with, be still and know that he is God. And then on the King's Highway Radio, I'd always say, stay on that straight and narrow. I don't know what we're going to say for this one yet.
If you're still here, you're in the exclusive fan club and you're going to get a T-shirt.
That's right. It's just going to be a plain white T-shirt, though.
Yeah.
I'll get a Sharpie and just draw a crown on it.
There you go, yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you again very soon.